Okay, now we are going to have a demo. So here basically I'm going to show you how to code, build, develop, deploy and execute your servlet application. Right. So all the topics which we have discussed in our tutorial earlier, we are going to see practically how to implement them real time. Okay. So, but before I will start writing a single line of code, I would like to take you through the setup you have to perform to make sure that you have the environment ready to develop your servlet applications, right? So, number one is JDK. It stands for Java Development Kit, and you need JDK to compile your Java classes, right? So we've discussed previously that servlets are nothing but Java classes, and they are a special kind of Java class, right? So ultimately you would need JDK to uh, compile your classes and get the class files out of your servlets. Okay. Next, Apache Tomcat. Tomcat is a web server, and this is the web container in which all your servlets and JSPs are deployed, right? So all these downloads which I've mentioned in this setup section are all open source, and you can download it all these things easily without any issues, right? So simply you go to the Tomcat website and you can get the latest version of Tomcat. So throughout this demo, I will be using Tomcat as my web server. So you have a lot of other web servers as well apart from Tomcat. Third thing is Eclipse IDE. So Eclipse IDE is a development environment in which you can easily code, build, deploy and execute your servlet applications. So it's a very user-friendly IDE, and it does a lot of things for you in the background. Okay, so you need to download this, but I suggest you not to start your first application with Eclipse IDE, because as I told you, the IDE itself does a lot of things for you behind the scenes, and you might not be able to understand how things are working. So until you get pretty comfortable with how all the pieces are put together and how everything works in a servlet, I would suggest you to simply go and type your code in, type your servlets in, type your all their classes and deploy them manually in the Tomcat server, rather than use the IDE's features to make your servlets development easy, right? So once you get a good hold of everything, then you can move to this IDE, right? Which will make life easier for you, right? And there are actually two versions of the Eclipse IDE. One is for the IDE for Java developers, and there is another called the IDE for Java EE developers. So it stands for Enterprise Edition. You need to get this one, right? So with the general Java developer, you will not be able to develop your servlet applications, right? So you need this to develop your servlet applications, and thus with this IDE you can do your servlets, EJBs and many other enterprise applications, right? Okay, so that's about the downloads you need to do, and once you are done with the downloads, you need to do some environment variable setup. So you need to set up some environment variables to make sure that the system can recognize your applications, and it is able to um, find the right path to your application, right? So you first thing is the Tomcat underscore home environment variable. I hope you know how to set up environment variable. If you are using Microsoft Windows, simply go to my computer, right click properties, and go to the advanced tab. you'll have an environments variable button there, and when you click on that, you get a dialog box which shows you a list of user environment variables and system environment variables. So you need to add the environment variables to the user environment variables, right? So add a user environment variable called tomcat underscore home, and give it a value, the directory where you install Tomcat. Okay, so in my case this is C Tomcat. So I install direct Tomcat in C Tomcat directory. So I give that value in the environment variable. Second thing is Java home environment variable, and you need to give the value of the directory where you installed JDK, right? And I suggest you to add the Java home bin directory to the class path system environment variable, because when you add this, you will be able to compile your Java classes from anywhere in the being in any directory. Okay, if not, you should you use the the Java compiler from the Java home bin directory only to compile all the time, right? So if you add the Java home bin directory to the class path, you can simply say Java C from any directory in your computer, and you will be able to compile the Java classes, right? So you just go to the system environment variable class path and simply edit that. Do not replace the existing value there. Edit it and go to the end of the existing value and put a semicolon there, and give the path of your JDK installation directory /bin, right? So that will set the Java home bin directory to the class path. Okay, and lastly, you need to add the Servlets API jar file as well to the class path. So there are quite a few ways in which you can add a jar file to a class path, and what I actually did was I simply added this jar file to the JRE-lib.ext folder. I simply picked up this and dropped it in the ext folder, and you can find the JRE-lib.ext in the JDK installation directory, right? So wherever you install JDK, you will find JRE folder there. Okay, so what is this Servlet API jar file? What does it contain? So we know that Servlets have a lot of other special classes called the HTTP Servlet request, HTTP Servlet response, HTTP Servlet, and a lot of other such special classes which are not present in the standard JDK, right? So all these classes are bundled in a jar, and that is nothing but the Servlet API.jar. So it contains all the special Servlet classes required to develop your Servlet applications. Right. So where do you get this jar file from? So basically, if you install Tomcat, you get this jar file bundled with the Tomcat installation itself. So wherever you have installed Tomcat, you will find this in the lib directory of your Tomcat installation, right? So you can simply pick up this jar file from that location and place it at the JRE-lib.ext folder. Right. So most of the web servers provide this jar file along with the installation, right? So it might not be named as Servlet API.jar in all of them, so the name might change. So you just have to look out for that, right? So this is it about the setup you need to do, and once you execute all these 5 steps, your environment would be ready to go ahead and execute your Servlet apps, right? So let's start off now. Okay, my first Servlet app. So let's discuss on a high level what do you require to develop your first Servlet application. So one mandatory thing is the environment setup, which we have already done. Okay, so what's the next step to it? How do you go about developing your Servlet applications, building it, deploying it, and executing it, right? So let's have a high level look first now. first thing you need is the servlets class, right? So you need to write a servlet class wherein you'll provide all your business logic related to your web application, right? So this servlet class might also make use of take the help of some other Java classes in order to get the final result, right? So the second thing is web.xml. What is this web.xml? This is nothing but a configuration file, right? So every web application, every servlet application should have a web.xml configuration file, right? So this is the place where the server first checks when a request comes from a client. So when a request comes from a client, the server goes to this web.xml configuration file first, checks for that particular request, tries to see if it finds a match. If it finds a match, takes the match, invokes your servlet, and gives the results back to the client, right? So you need a web.xml configuration file. So the third thing now is build.jar file, right? So you have the servlet class, you have the web.xml class, and what you need to do in order to deploy your application into a web server is build a jar file out of your classes and HTML's configuration file, all this. So you need to build a jar including the servlets class and the web.xml, and once you build the jar, you deploy that jar into the web server, right? So alright, so once you deploy it, your application is ready, and you can simply go ahead and enter the URL and execute your servlets application. Okay, so now let's have a look in detail how to go about performing all these 5 steps, right? Okay. So the first thing is writing your servlets class. Okay, so okay, let me tell you first what I'm trying to do in this first servlet application. What is the business logic I'm going to implement? So in my first servlet application, I'm simply going to print the text hello world to on the screen on the web page of the user, right? So when the user will enter the URL, the result of that would be a hello world text displayed on the web page. I wanted to make this first excuse me, I wanted to make this first application so simple because I would like you to concentrate more on the other things, like how do you get all the pieces together, and how do you build your jar file, how you deploy it, and I would like you to concentrate more on how the code flows between the different methods of the classes, and in which order. So all those different things about the servlets and the application, web application on the whole. So so that's the reason I didn't put in any business logic in this first application, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and see our hello world servlet. I've written this code for the servlets and the web.xml file ahead because I didn't want to waste much time in typing in here, right? And but I'll do my best to explain all the stuff which I've put in here. Okay, right. So this is our hello world servlet, and first thing, my servlet is in the package called com Sharad Balepu servlets package. Okay, after the package declaration, I have a bunch of imports which I'm using in my servlets class, right? And if you see here, all these classes, Java X.servlet classes, are part of the servlet API.jar file which we included, right? So these are the servlet specific classes which we get from the servlets API.jar file. Okay, so this is my hello world servlet, So we know that in order to write a servlet, you need to extend HTTP servlet. Okay, since we already imported HTTP servlet, we don't need to put the whole path in here. I simply say extends HTTP servlet. And I really don't need to implement the servlets interface, because we know that the HTTP servlet extends generic servlet, which in turn implements the servlet interface. So your hello world servlet will indirectly be implementing the servlet interface, so you don't need to explicitly write the implements and the servlets there. Okay. So once I do this extends HTTP servlet on my class has got some special features now, and those special features are nothing but the servlets features, right? The servlets behavior. So until I put this, my class is any other simple class, but once I put this extends HTTP servlet, my class is a special class which has got the servlets behavior in it. Okay. So I've written all the methods in this class, all the callback methods which we have discussed during a session: the init method, the service method, doget, dopost, the destroy method. Right? So I've simply put in, whether I use it or not, I simply put in all the methods, and I've given print statements in all these methods, so that you will be able to see the flow, how it takes place uh, between all these methods, in what order these methods are called, right? So we have discussed earlier that we don't need a constructor to be declared in our servlets, right? So practically real time you don't put in a constructor in your servlet, because you won't be doing anything in the constructor as well. All the initialization code will go in the init method, right? And the JVM will put the default constructor in your servlets class. So I simply put in a system .out.println statement there in the constructor. Next, the init method. This is the place where all your initialization takes place. So if you had to make some initialization, like getting the connection to the database or any other stuff which you want to perform once in the servlet lifetime, right? You know that for every request that comes in the servlet, the service method is called, which in turn calls a doget or dopost, but the init method is only called once when the servlet is loaded, right? So only one time initialization stuff you put in the init method. Next, about the service method, it takes in the parameters HTTP servlet request and HTTP servlet response, throws servlets exception and IO exception. Okay, so one thing, please make a note of it here. When you develop your servlet applications real time, you do not write the service method as well. In fact, you take the default implementation provided by the HTTP servlet. Again, I just put in here this method so that you'll be able to know the flow and when this method is called and how it is called. Okay, so I've just tried to emulate the logic which would have been written in the HTTP servlet, right? So the HTTP servlet class has a similar logic to this, but apart from this, there will be a lot of other code. But as of now, at this point of time, I'm only interested in doget or dopost method, right? Because that's the place where I'm going to write my business logic. So I simply capture the type of method passed by the user, right? So I use the request.get method to determine what type of request the user had sent, the client has sent, right? And if it was of type get, I call the doget method passing the request response objects, and if it was of type post, I simply call the dopost method passing in the request and response objects, right? So the only thing the service method is going to do is take in the request, check the type of request. If it was get, call the doget method. If it was post, call the dopost method. And because in our first call we do not provide any method type, right? It takes the get by default, right? We've discussed that if there is no specific method provided, the default is get. So my doget method should be called now, right? So that's the reason I put in all my business logic in the doget method. Okay, so this is my doget method, which again takes the HTTP request and the HTTP response as the parameters, and I simply give a print statement here saying that I'm in doget now. And one thing you'll have to make a note of is the content type. So I'm setting the content type to text HTML. So this is going to tell the client that the type of response I'm sending back to the client is of type HTML, right? And if you would have been sending a PDF document to a client, you would have simply said application/PDF, right? So, and I set this content type to the response, which will be sent back to the client, right? So here I'm saying that I'm sending a response of type HTML to the client back. Okay, and I get the handle to the print writer object, and whatever I write to the print writer object will be displayed on my screen on the web page. Okay, so whatever I pass to the out.println statement will be displayed on the screen. Basically this will be passed in as a response to the user. Okay, and once the user sees, once the client or the web browser sees that the type of response is of type HTML, it now prepares itself so that it can take in the HTML and parse that HTML and render a very nicely beautiful user format text to the client, right, to the end client. So what I have put in this out.println method is nothing but pure HTML code, right? So whatever I put in this out.println is I put the HTML tag, the body tag, and hello world text. So, and I end the body tag and the HTML tag. So basically if I have to write this HTML code in a HTML file, the output would be a simple hello world, the response. Okay, let us just try that. What I'll do is I'll simply say test, okay, and whatever I have written in my class in there, the HTML code, I'm just putting that code in this HTML file, and I'll save this file and I'll say test.html. okay, so let's see what happens when okay, so the result is a simple hello world text is displayed on my web page. Okay, so the same thing should be displayed once I execute my hello world application. The result should be similar to what we have just seen. It should just display a web page with the text hello world on it, right? So let's see later if that is a result what we'll get or not. Okay, right, so now the dopost method, similarly the dopost method also takes the request and response objects, and since my doget is going to be called, the dopost will not be called, right? So that's the reason I didn't put in any business logic in dopost, and I put all of the business logic in the doget. If your type of method was post, the dopost method would have been called, and you write all your business logic in the dopost. Okay, and finally the destroy method, wherein I simply give the print statement saying that I'm in the destroy method. Okay, so this is my servlets class. So what I've done, I've simply written all the callback methods, and I've put print statements in all of the callback methods, and I've performed some business logic in my doget method, right? Okay, so we are done with number one, the servlet class. Okay, Number 2, the web.xml configuration file. Let's see how my web.xml configuration file looks. So this is my web.xml configuration file for the servlet application, my hello world servlet application. Okay, so you can ignore these first 5 lines because you simply need to copy these you can copy it from any of the existing web.xml files and put it in your file. So you don't need to worry much about this at this point of time. So you have this XML file which has a web app element, and this ends here at the end of the file. Okay, and I've simply given a display name text servlets to this application. Okay, the most important part in this whole web.xml file for us now is this part which I've highlighted. So this is the servlets and the servlets mapping element. So when a request comes to a particular servlet, and let's say this was hosted on my servlets application was hosted on Yahoo Mail, okay, on Yahoo. Okay, if the user would have entered yahoo.com/hello, what would have happened? So the web server takes in this URL www.yahoo.com/hello and tries to find a match for this URL in my web.xml. Okay, so here you see there is a URL pattern which says hello, a URL pattern which ends with hello, right? And it looks like there's a match to this URL pattern. Okay, so it sees the URL sent by the client and tries to find a match in the URL pattern, and it sees, okay, looks like I found a match. Okay, and it goes to the corresponding servlet name for that URL pattern. It sees hello world. Okay, now tries to find this hello world servlet name in one of the servlet tags, and it finds, yes, there is a servlet element, servlet name tag, servlet name element in the servlet element. Okay, so it finds a match in one of the servlet elements. Okay, so after it finds a match, it goes to the corresponding servlet class, right? And now it sees that the servlet class is the class which I've written, com.shellbalepu.servlets.helloworld-servlet. So it loads this particular servlet, calls the init method first for the first request, and for the subsequent request it calls the init, for the first request it calls the init method, and then calls the service method, which will in turn call my doget method where I've written my business logic, right? And for all subsequent requests it is only going to call the service method, which calls the doget method in turn. Right? So this is how a URL requested by the client is ultimately mapped to a servlet serving the request, right? And the servlet is executed. Okay, alright, so we have done with step 2 as well. We got our servlets class, we got our web.xml file ready. What do we need to do now? We need to build a jar file. Okay, so I just have my servlets class, but I've got a Java file, but I need to generate a class file. So let me compile this class. So my servlets class is test servlets, the directory. Okay, and within this I'll compile my hello world servlet. Servlet.java. So this is going to compile my hello world servlet and generate a class file, right? So here is it. Okay. So now in order to deploy generate a jar file and deploy it into Tomcat, you need to follow a particular directory structure in which you need to put different types of files. Okay, so let's see what is that. So for Tomcat this is my web application home directory. Okay, and in your application home directory you need to create a web.inf folder in which you put your web.xml file. I'll name this as web.inf and I put in my web.xml file in this, and within the web.inf directory I again create a folder called classes where all my servlet classes and all the other Java classes will go into. Okay. So my servlet class goes into the classes folder. Okay. Right. So this is the directory structure which I need to follow, okay, in order to deploy this into Tomcat. Now let me simply go ahead and build a jar file. I'll go to my web app directory hello world and I simply say jar cvr and I'll say include all files. Okay. Okay, I haven't given my jar file name, so I'll say I'll name my jar file as hello world. Okay, one thing here is this should be a .war file because your Tomcat server expects a war file, right? So you simply jar it and you name it as .war, again not .jar. This is one thing you should make a note of, and I'll again say include all the files in this directory in this war file. Okay. Okay, so here is it. So this has built a .war file for me. This is nothing but a jar, right? And I've included the Servlets class and the web.xml configuration file to this war file. Okay. So the next thing I need to do is deploy. Okay. I need to deploy this war file into Tomcat. Okay. Let's see how to do it. Okay. So before you can before you deploy your application, let me start my server. So simply go to the Tomcat installation directory and just type startup. Okay, I think it's okay. Go to the Tomcat bin directory and type startup, right? So this is going to start your web server. Okay. How do you check whether your server has been started or not? Open your browser and go to localhost 8080. So unless you have modified any default settings, the URL to get to your Tomcat server is localhost and port 8080, right? So once you type in this URL, you will go to your Tomcat's server homepage. Okay. So this takes me to this Tomcat server homepage, and if I'm able to see this page, I know that my server has been started now. Okay. So at the top left here, I've got this administrator section, and I click on the Tomcat manager hyperlink which I have in here. So it asks for my Tomcat username and password which I have created while installation. Okay. So this takes me to the web app manager page where I find the list of applications deployed in this server. Okay, so I don't see my application here, and once I deploy the war file, my application should come in here in the list of applications. Okay, so how do you deploy your application to the server? There are a few methods in which you can do it, and one of the methods is simply create a war file and deploy the war file here. So that's what we did. So my war file location, I know my war file location, so I'll simply add that location here, and the name of my war file is hello world.war. Okay, and say deploy. Okay, so once you deploy it, it's going to give you a message which says whether the deploy was successful or not, and here I got a message saying okay. So that means that my application, my web application has been deployed successfully to Tomcat server. Okay. So we are done with deploy as well, and finally we need to execute our application to see if what we have done was correct and we are getting the desired output or not. Okay. So here if you see, I've probably I can increase this. Okay, so here if you see in the list of applications, my application hello world is right in here. Okay, and the display name which I've given in my web.xml file, text servlets, and if you see that start is I don't have a hyperlink on start, which implies that my application has been started. Okay, it's already started, I don't need to start it again, right? So how do you test the application? What is the URL you have to given to test your application? So you simply click on this hello world hyperlink which I have in my hyperlinks in my applications link. So when I click, this is going to take me to the home page of my application, right? So here I'm getting a HTTP status 404 error. It says the resource was not found. And why was it not found? Because it didn't find a match, it didn't find a corresponding match in the web.xml file. Okay, so what's the only URL pattern we have given in our web.xml file? A pattern which ends with hello. So let me simply try and give that pattern here. Okay, /hello. So this pattern is ending with hello, and it should match the URL mapping in my web.xml file, and my hello world servlet should be called, and it should output the hello world text on the screen. Okay. Oh, okay, one mistake I did while doing the war file is I didn't give the package structure for this hello world class. So let me quickly do that. My class is present in com Sharad Servlets class. Okay, so let me just cut this and paste it here. Okay, so I have my hello world application in which I have web.inf, in which I have my web.xml file, and in classes I have this package structure com Sharad Servlets hello world class. So this is perfect now. Okay, so I'll again go and build my war file. I'll say hello world.war. Okay, so what I'll do now is first all my applications will be put in the web apps directory. So we've deployed our hello world war earlier, so there is already a hello world war present here in the web apps, and there is also a hello world directory present which contains all the information pertaining to my hello world application. So I'll okay, I've deleted that now. So again, let me go to my Tomcat since I've deleted that now, it doesn't come up in my applications list. Okay. So now I simply add this again, deploy this. The name is hello world.war. Okay, and I say deploy. It gives a message okay. So let me go ahead and test now. This is my hello world app. So this should give a page not found, but now I'll try to give hello here. Right, so here is the output. So now it has gone to web.xml, found a match for this URL, and found the corresponding servlets which serves this request, loaded that servlet, and invoked the init method, then service method, which will in turn call the doget method, where I've put my logic, business logic, to print hello world on the screen, and here it is. Okay, so if you have a look at my Tomcat screen, you will see the print statements which you have given in our class. So the first thing was it did was it printed in hello world constructor. So first my constructor was called, and then the init method was called, and then the service method was called, and then the doget method was called from the service method. So this is exactly the same flow which we have discussed, right? And we will be seeing more about this in the later part of the later demo session, which will include a little complex scenario, right? So that's it about the hello world servlet application, the first servlet application. Okay, thank you.